Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Whole 10 Yards, starring Bruce Willis, Matthew Perry, Amanda Peet, Natasha Henstridge, and Kevin Pollak, directed by Howard Deutsch, the replacements director. Now, I remember going to theaters for this thing, and was it as good as the first one? Let's talk about it. We opened in 1961 with Jimmy the Tulip Tedeschi and Gianni Gogolak were kids, and they fight over who hit first, and they get to Yanni's father Laszlo, played by Kevin Pollak, who splits a dollar bill with Jimmy and Yanni when they were kids, which doesn't make sense as an origin story of how they hate each other in the first movie. While we get back to 2004 in Mexico, where Jill, returned by Amanda Peet, gets back home to Jimmy, who loves cooking and cleaning instead of killing people. As Jill figures out a way to tell Jimmy, returned by Bruce Willis, how she almost killed someone back home in America. And Jimmy changed into Martha Stewart, and all for the wrong reasons. And I can't stand these two characters, whereas last time they were relatable while back in Chicago, Laszlo is out of prison, and I find this character to be absolutely annoying as hell. Oz, returned by Matthew Perry, checks on his wife Cynthia, returned by Natasha Henstridge, 3 times and another and is an amateur gunman himself. And again, I'm just annoyed with Oz and Cynthia being in this movie, and each character are living in different places, with like Laszlo killing the bad guy after asking him to tell Laszlo to back in Chicago, and this script makes no sense whatsoever. And the cinematography looks very bad, while Jill talks to Oz behind Jimmy's back, leading to believe he's talking to Cynthia behind his back, as Oz has a new dental assistant. Julie has something is shady about her and Oz, and Cynthia is pregnant. Oz and Cynthia are pregnant, and the acting in this is very poor. And we see Cynthia and Jimmy are talking behind Oz and Jill's back, as this movie is preposterous. Oz learns Cynthia has been kidnapped and held by Laszlo because Jimmy killed Yanni at one point in the last movie, and they try to kill Oz as he escapes. Well, Laszlo has Cynthia held hostage, and I can't make sense of this plot at all because it makes no sense. And Oz gets to Mexico, where Jimmy is at, and goes by his house, and Oz almost gets killed after squishing one of his chickens. And the humor in this movie sucks, and he enters at his own risk and acts very disrespectful to Oz, and the acting in this is very piss poor. Jill is excited about going into action with Jimmy and Oz, and this movie is just a bunch of nonsense, while Oz tells Jimmy and Jill Cynthia is pregnant, and Jimmy calls Oz a squealer when Laszlo attacks Jimmy's house, and the shooters keep missing them, and they abandon Oz's car and come back to California, where Oz lives, and Jimmy tells Oz to shut up quite a few times throughout the movie, and it's desperate on trying to be funny, but the truth is, it isn't. And this is very poorly made from start to finish. Cynthia flirts with one of the kidnappers, and she upsets him as Laszlo's mother, Anya, watches Cynthia, while Jimmy doesn't take off Cynthia's present, which is a crucifix on his neck, as Oz brings it up, and Jill overreacts to it, until Laszlo and his killers show up and Jimmy takes one of the hostages and shows it to Laszlo and drives away into a motel and gets a room, while Jimmy and Jill argue like cats and dogs about how Jimmy is still in love with Cynthia, and he says the crucifix is his good luck charm. And Oz is in the middle of all this, while Laszlo gets one of his guys on the phone, and I'm starting to check out of this movie, and I have 45 to 50 more minutes of movie left. And why am I this pissed off at this movie? Because it sucks. Jimmy and Jill argue door by door, and Oz gets involved as they eventually go to the bar in town, and Jimmy is drunk as hell and acts loudly, and he cries, and this is absolutely horrible. And the hostage gets the idea of Jill having an affair with him behind Jimmy's back, and the script is horrendous. And we move on to the next day, and Jimmy and Oz sleep next to each other in the weirdest way possible, and they're butt naked, And this scene is obnoxious and weird to my taste. While Jill tries to have sex with Oz behind Jimmy's back until Jimmy falls back in love with Jill. And this movie is very problematic from the get-go, as Jill's naked body was shown in the last movie as it was R-rated, whereas here it's not shown because this is a PG-13 rated movie. Jimmy walks in and sees Oz touching his wife and throws Oz out of the bathroom and is knocked out for 45 minutes, and they start acting like a loving married couple again, and Oz and the hostage hear them humping each other as they load a car and make a deal with Laszlo, while the hostage was stupid enough to release himself, and he gets killed while hopping in the trunk, as they were making a trade for him towards Cynthia, and Laszlo calls Jimmy with not the hostage, as he's in the trunk with the keys, when he says to open the trunk in front of the front seat driver, until a shooter shoots at them and kills the hostage in the trunk, as the shooter must have been Laszlo, which is a terrible idea to begin with. Even when they have the hostage, and this is so stupid in so many levels, Jimmy blames Jill for the death of the hostage, and she decides to leave Jimmy, where he acts like a jackass. And all the hypocrisy coming from Jimmy is so awful. And Oz sticks with Jimmy as she has his bag and she finds his broken in half. She finds the broken in half $1 bill, while Laszlo calls Oz as he finds a way to save Cynthia from death. And Oz drives away in a car with Jimmy following him behind the taxi cab, as Jimmy calls Jill and Oz getting back to his dentist's office and cancels his appointments for the rest of his life, and explains what happened to him for the last couple of days as he goes crazy. And Matthew Perry did a horrible job this time as Oz, whereas last time he was a great presence, but here he's much worse until Jimmy comes into his office and gets knocked out by Julie, who turns out to be Jules, as she was Frankie Fake's brother, who was killed in the end of the last movie. And I knew something was suspicious about her from her first scene in the movie, as it was obvious. Oz and Jimmy wake up next to Cynthia, and Oz learns she's been talking to Jimmy behind his back, and Laszlo comes in, as Laszlo was giving me the biggest headache in this whole movie, and as his accent was horrible, like he was trying to mimic Joe Pesci, because he sounds horrible. And Jill comes in with their hostage and makes a deal with Laszlo, and she has a bomb in the hostage, and she tries to kill Jimmy as she takes off the crucifix out of Jimmy's neck, while Oz and Cynthia get untied, and she shoots at him, but not dead, and he gets back up and beats up and ties Laszlo, who happens to be Jimmy's father, as well as killing Jules, and they kill his assistants dead, and they get out of it alive, and we learn Jill is pregnant, and Jimmy's baby, and they drive away, and the cops get Laszlo arrested and put away for the rest of his life, and the climax is horrendous, as was the script. And how horrendous was this movie? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 1.7 out of 10. I'm absolutely annoyed with the characters, and they're absolutely unlikable from start to finish, as Jimmy's origin story makes no sense, and the script makes no sense, as the cinematography is very bad throughout, and the acting in this is very poor. This movie is preposterous, as I can't make sense of the plot at all, because it makes no sense, and the humor in this sucks, as this is trying desperately to be funny, but sadly, it's not. This whole movie is just a bunch of nonsense and absolutely poorly made from start to finish. This is the worst sequel to a comedy I've seen, but maybe not ever. But it's really bad, and this is a strong non-recommendation for this movie, because I'm pissed off, as this movie sucks terribly. And at the end of the day, I never want to think about this movie ever again, because it's absolutely horrible, and the script is horrendous. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this series. And until then, tulip.